I want to get away to a violent island day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, I want to get away for a violent island day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Get Away is a Shudder original getting a limited theatrical release. It's from ISC Films and Wayward Entertainment. Carry on, my Wayward Entertainment. There will be peace when you are... that doesn't really work. No wonder Kansas went with sun. That being said, speaking of sun, here comes the sun. Do-do-do-do. Here comes the sun on this Swedish Scandinavian island paradise. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. By the way, that's actually how the Navy of that particular region is kept in check. Because they have barcodes. They Scandinavian. Thank you. I'll be here all week now that everybody's shut off this review because of that terrible intro and these terrible puns. Let's talk about Get Away. Okay, I'll stop. This was directed by Stephen Hars. Or Stefan Hars. I'm sorry. I'm sure he's a nice guy. I just couldn't help it. And this was written, produced by, and stars Nick Frost as Richard. That's the long name for Dick. So he's an elongated dick. He's an elongated frosty dick. Man, I'm so goddamn mature. So fucking mature. Nick Frost from Shaun of the Dead and another Shudder original, Black Cab. He's also been in a lot of other stuff, don't get me wrong, but thankfully this is better than Black Cab. Now, how much better? You'll find out in a bit. So we have Richard, who wants to take his family on a holiday. And they book a Airbnb. Why is it called an Airbnb when it's not up in the goddamn air? Is it up in the air that you're going to get out there alive or get out of there alive? Like if you're in Barbarian? That's something I need to rewatch at some point. Can't wait for the new film from the guy that did Barbarian. If you've seen the trailer, you know. That being said, he has his wife, Susan Aisling B, who, yes, more of her. My God. Good goddamn Christ on the Irish Beauty Bayou. That is a siren right there. She's a comedian. She's also been in television. She was in Home Sweet Home Alone. I'm just going to ignore that movie exists because it was not any good. Wasn't her fault. And they have their kids. Sean, Sebastian Croft, who was in Dampire. Or Dampire. Ooh, Dampire. I'm trying to have fun here because there isn't a lot to talk about with this particular movie. And Macy Ayers plays Jesse, and they are 4 people. They have they just have a nice, tight little, knit community, and they're going to this, like Scandinavian, Swedish island thing where the locals aren't very happy that they're there because it turns out that, there's a cult. They don't worship blue oysters. I've been a round kid. I've been a square kid. All the usual jokes that I say, and let's just say violence ensues eventually because the people are especially goddamn weird. So it's a comedy horror comedy, however you want to go about it, and thankfully has a few decent moments. There are some admittedly funny moments in the beginning, and the third act does really ramp up the violence. The problem, or rather at least the biggest problem of this particular production, is even though the acting is fairly decent and there are some well-worn cliches, they get boosted up a little bit thanks to a little bit of ingenuity, thanks to Nick Frost and the central characters. There is a lot that drags in this, and this movie is only 90 minutes bell to bell, and that's including end credits, and that's not all that great. I drove up to a theater about 35 miles from my house, essentially, because they were showing earlier showings. I had errands to do. Christmas gifts, shall we say. And I decided, I'm going to sit down here, and I was the only one there. It's also one of those old theaters. This is just a little sidebar. Those old theaters where they've updated the carpeting. The concessions are nice and everything, and they've updated those. And there are modernized parts. But you can tell one thing they have modernized, and that's the seating. These cushions, at least had cushions in at some point, during, I don't know, possibly the, first Bush administration, or maybe the second Bush administration, if we're being honest. And I've been to that theater a few times. I actually did go recently, well, not recently, but in this year, this calendar year, as it were. I watched Mars Express, another terrific movie that you should check out. But I was by myself, so at least I got to have a private screening. But it It reminds me why I try to stick closer to home. That's why I wish my local theater, a Regal, would have earlier showings and I wouldn't have to do this stuff. That being said, I do what I can to deliver the content to you, like this review of Getaway. There really hasn't been that much about the goddamn movie. And the thing is, there isn't a lot to it, and the twist can be seen coming a mile away because of a particular piece of dialogue uttered by one character within the first 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. And, yeah, well-worn tropes, a decent third act, and, again, Aisling, but God, she's so fucking beautiful. Good grief, what beautiful eyes. And I do have to say that Macy Ayers, I think, has a bright future as far as how she has a couple maddening looks on her face as she's being driven by this madness, like, this stuff going on, with these locals and everything. I thought that was actually kind of neat. Sebastian Croft is fine. Nick Frost is his usual self, but it has its issues. You probably could just wait for this to come out on Shudder. If it's playing at your local theater at a reasonable hour and you got a few bucks to spare, and or if you have an app and you can get it just for a small convenience fee, do that. You might find some enjoyment out of it. Personally, it was what it was. So I'm going to get into spoilers, but it's in theaters and on Shudder very soon. 3, 2, 1, spoilers. So here's a particular thing. You have all the locals. There's all this violence, sacrificing people. And it turns out that Susan mentions early on to the lead lady, you want to call her that as far as a character, she says, well, it turns out that, one of her great-great ancestors actually was one of the people killed on this island, which right there tips you off that they are actually motivated to be there. And they're motivated to be there because even though there is some weird stuff like with their Airbnb host dressing up in the daughter's underwear, and, however you get down is your business, but that's really goddamn creepy. And a few decent pieces of dialogue. It really drags once they get settled into the house, and then it becomes obvious where it's going. The family is they're actually the killers. And they're just doing this just for fun, but also maybe that whole thing with Susan was just a red herring, or maybe they're just doing this just to wipe people out. There's a detective that investigates this murder at this little restaurant right by the ferry. And, that actually was a pretty funny part with the restaurant with the guy, and I assume his daughter or wife or whatever, I don't know. Nick Frost, Richard, actually stabbed him. So, yeah, they got stabbed by a dick, a frosty dick again. And so the detective's investigating that stuff, and they eventually go on the offensive, killing a whole bunch of these, locals and everything for fun. It's for a laugh. Also, Susan probably has a little bit of personal investment because of, again, her great ancestor, as it were. And there are some splashy, moments of violence. Nick Frost gets kind of stabbed through the goddamn, like the mouth there, but doesn't die. And Jesse gets shot in the stomach, but somehow is all right. And, yeah, people eventually, end up dying. And even though Nick Frost does get his hand blown off by one of the guys before they meet an unfortunate end, by getting their head cut off. Then, before that, there were the locals doing their sacrificial thing, like a play to honor their gods. And then this violence happens with the family doing all this. They even killed their Airbnb host, or B&B host. To be fair, he was a creep, so, the character kind of had to die. The guy played him well, I do want to say. He's like a Swedish Crispin Glover. Not like Crispin Glover, he just plays a really good creep. But yeah, they end up escaping just fine. The detective gets them. They pretend that, it wasn't them, like Shaggy. Not Zoinks, but the R&B artist. And there was this other guy, this weird bald guy, Yuhan, I think was his name, that was acting weird to them on the ferry and then was just, acting strange, but then eventually left the island, except he didn't. He was sleeping in a boat. Then other police show up and they end up shooting him, and yeah, that's pretty much it by the end of that. Oh, yes, and they're down to 3 people because the son actually isn't the son. He got killed, and that's it. That's it. He got killed because he annoyed Richard, and Mr. Frosty Dick decided to stab him. So, yeah, that's about it right there. C+. It is what it is. It's not awful. It has a decent or pretty good third act, but almost felt more like a short film. Like there was a lot of padding in this, so it was what it was. Anyway, so agree, disagree what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, and Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Rickland. I'll see you soon.